Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I was thinking when I listened to Senator Bennett's testimony, I went to the University of Georgia in 1962, which was back when the earth was cooling a long time ago, and I know things aren't necessarily relevant, but I think we're all sitting on a ham sandwich, starving to death. When I went to the University of Georgia in 1962, they admitted every applicant who was a graduate of a Georgia high school. And Dean William Tate, who was the dean of students, would get you in the Fine Arts Auditorium on the first day, 2,000 freshmen. He'd say, look to your left and look to your right, and one of you won't be here next quarter. They managed the cost of the university through attrition of academic achievement, but they took everybody who applied. Today at the University of Georgia, they have 7.5 applicants for every one person they accept, number one. Number two, the graduation rate is probably 100%, but it's certainly in the 90s. And every one of those students enters the University of Georgia on some type of a scholarship because of the Hope Scholarship Program. So we have a lot to be thankful for in terms of what higher education has done over the last 53 years. I remember my dad calling me in the living room when I graduated from high school, and he said, son, I'm going to make you two promises for higher ed. One is if you go to the University of Georgia, I'll pay for the cost of your education as long as you don't go one day longer than 4 years. I went to the University of Georgia, and I went to summer school for 3 summers to make sure it was 4 years when I got out. Necessity is the mother of invention, and I think therein lies part of our problem. We need to start educating students on what it's going to take them to pay the debt that they pay and give them enough relevant information early in the decision-making process so they borrow on a more reasonable basis, number one. And number two, recognize our university system cost is in large measure because of the competitive nature of our university system. Everybody's trying to have the best student personal fitness program, the best football team, the best library, the best everything else. We got a lot of bricks and mortar costs and everything that's going to continue to go up. So the point I want to make is you can't compare apples and oranges. You got to compare apples and apples, and we're lucky to be where we are. But we're at a break point. We're at a point where we may kind of invert because of the rising cost of higher education and because of the rising debt of students. What you're doing at the University of Indiana system is really remarkable. I agree with Lisa in terms of what she said about the letter, but more often recognizing early that tracking students, making students aware of the cost of borrowing and helping them to counsel them in borrowing makes all the difference in the world. And I commend you on doing it. And we ought to be doing that at every institution in higher learning. Secondly, there are lots of examples where students who've fallen through the cracks, minority students, poor students, people like that, are now being helped by universities. 2 in Georgia, for example. Georgia State University has developed a program called Panther Grants, where they track 24,000 students at Georgia State University. If they see one falling through the cracks because of finances, they call them in. And more often than not, a small amount of money at a critical time in their education can keep them in school versus dropping out to work. Georgia State's average Panther grant is $300, yet they've saved countless students from dropping out of school and going to work. Georgia Tech has a program now called the Wayne Clough Full Scholarship Program, where if you're academically qualified and economically not able to pay for tuition, you go to the Georgia Institute of Technology on a full boat as long as you do $2,500 in student work during the course of the year. That's the Wayne Clough Scholarship Program. So we have universities in Georgia that are creating ways to bring those students who might fall through the cracks or the shrinking middle class back into our university system. And I know I'm supposed to ask a question and I'm not doing it, but the point I want to make is we got a lot to be thankful for about where we are. I don't know how much the state of Georgia spent on the University of Georgia, but probably 75% of its revenues were in 1962 when I went there. Now I think it's 23.5%. I don't know what Louisiana State is. 13. What is Indiana?
A little bit higher than that, I think about 18%.
But most universities in the country are 25% or less state universities, and that's down from 75% or more 50 years ago. But look at what we have as a product. So I think the important lesson on the cost of higher education is the university systems of the United States of America have an obligation to the potential students of those universities. Give them the best debt education they can, the best timely information they can, and the best creative opportunities they can to continue to go to these universities, and recognize every brick and mortar that you put on that campus contributes to the higher cost of the university that you're running. And every now and then when we look for alternatives to bricks and mortar, we're probably going to be a lot better off in terms of managing our cost. You're welcome to comment on that if you want to, but I just had to get that out. That's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you.